Welcome, Rob. Today on our podcast, we are joined with Pastor Rob from Forest City Community Church. You are a Ram on the Raw show, which is a really authentic man. And
Okay,
yeah,
interesting. Nice,
and I'm
nice.
honored to have you here. We've had a lot of people request some questions that I need to ask you, so this should be interesting.
All right.
So, Rob, I'm going to start right off, get right into it,
Yeah.
and ask you, what does authenticity mean to you?
Um, I think authenticity means, the essence of the word is truth, of course. So it means to be able to be who God made you to be, essentially, um, and to um, and to live into that best side of yourself that I think is, what you were born to be.
Do you feel, because I feel that as you develop and you go through your life, authenticity changes. And what authenticity meant to me when I was 16 versus, at this day and
Yeah.
age, just maturing. Do you feel that you've evolved in your authenticity as you've gone through your life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. I mean, I certainly think that we all evolve in different ways as we sort of encounter life, and it shapes us in different ways. So it has to have an impact on you. At the same time, I would say that I think the core of who you are, the core of who I am, um, I, I think hasn't really changed much. But certainly you have to there's parts of how you interact with the world where you learn and you grow, and that does shift things a bit. But I would say that authenticity, I would hope that there's an anchoredness about a person that doesn't change.
I have to agree with that. To agree with it. I think for me, if you had asked me that when I was like 16, 17, I wouldn't even know how to answer that. I'd be like, what is authenticity?
Because you don't know anything when you're
No,
16 or
exactly.
17.
Hope my son's listening.
Yeah. We
So
just alienated all the teenage listeners
we
from your
sure did.
podcast. So
Thank you for doing
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's okay.
That's great. Um, um, Okay, so I have to ask a question, and you are able to deny the question if you want.
Yeah.
But I want to get to know who Rob is before Rob became Pastor Rob.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I know that you were quite a hockey buff. You
Yeah.
played hockey,
Yeah.
and who were you prior to being a pastor?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so I can tell I'd be happy to tell you the sort of shift period in my life where I went from being no way, no the heck in the world am I ever going to be a pastor to, oh my goodness, I think I'm going to be a pastor. Like, I'll be happy to tell you.
Yeah, I would love to hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So I would say that I was in some respects kind of a typical Canadian kid growing up. And it's true. I played a lot of hockey and loved the game and had a lot of friends and, had a motorcycle in high school and worked really hard to be cool
Were you
and
like a bad boy?
um a little bit
Yeah.
sometimes. Yep, absolutely. I can't deny that. Um and honestly, so I was kind of sailing along just on that path on life. And then I went to university. And I what I really thought it was going to be is I thought I was going to be a high school teacher. I was going to be a phys ed and English teacher.
Wow.
Yes. And so I kind of settled on that path because I did have a heart. Interesting how we just talked about 16 and 17-year-olds. I really felt like I wanted to be able to impact teenagers.
Okay.
And I thought this would be fantastic. I'll be a teacher. And I was into my third year in university. And all of a sudden, this this feeling just started hitting me in my mind and my heart and it was almost like overpowering. And that was the sensation that I'm supposed to be a pastor.
And
And
how old were you at
I
that?
at that time, third year university, so I'm 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I am just like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I thought, I just thought, not that I didn't have respect for pastors, but I just saw them as being I just didn't see them as being relevant people to most people in life.
Right.
And I wanted to be relevant. And I just thought, no, this is there's the signals that are coming to me through all of this are wrong because I'm not going to be a pastor. That's ridiculous. Anyways, but the sensation just stayed with me. It hung on me like a sort of a cloud, but it was kind of good. And I didn't know what to do with it. And so I remember it was probably one of the most, you talk about honest, it was probably one of the most honest prayers I've ever prayed. And I remember just praying to God. I remember saying, okay, if this is you, God, if this is real, if this is what I'm supposed to do, listen, hey, listen, you're God. I'll do what you want me to do.
So
But,
did you have
but
that strong connection already with, like, did you
yeah,
grow up in a religious household? Like,
I did grow up in a faith-based household. I
okay.
did grew up in a Christian home. My parents weren't perfect people by any means, but they did, take us to church, and so I certainly had an awareness of God from an early age. Um, and I certainly had sort of I would say I had an encounter with Jesus when I was about 12, and I realized, wow, this Jesus is real. So I had a disposition towards God, toward Jesus, but I just this whole idea of somehow being like it just didn't make sense to me. So I did. I prayed this. I remember this prayer very clearly. I said, God, if this is really what I'll of course I'll do this, but I have three big major problems with this crazy plan. If that's what I'm supposed to do, I was just honest about them.
Mhm.
And I said, first thing is, um, I I'm only like a little over a year down my university uh, schooling, and I was like, I have only ever been into school for what I can get out when I get out. Like I'm not a student. There's no way. And I knew that if I was going to go into ministry, that'd probably be another 4 years in a master's degree program. And all. I was like, can't do it. Number two, I was going to school in university in Western Michigan, which was about 7 hours from where I grew up in Toronto. And I was like, I was one of these homesick people, always homesick. And every chance I got for 2.5 years, I would find a ride on a Friday afternoon. I would get the ride all the way to Toronto, get home at midnight, have a day and a half at home before I'd go back 7 hours. I was just homesick chronically. And I thought there's no way I'm going to live because university or the next stage of my education was probably going to be in the same part of Michigan. So I thought I can't do it. 5.5 years, just can't. It's impossible. And then the funniest thing was I had just broken up with this one girl that I had been dating, and she was just the love of my life, and I was like, and she broke my heart, and I was pretty wounded at the time still. I was like, and God, I'm alone. I can't imagine doing all this. So I just prayed that prayer very honestly. I'm going to say for a week, and the most bizarre thing happened to me. First of all, I realized my third condition, which was kind of inappropriate. It was like you can't really say, "Okay, God, give me the girl and I'll do it." Okay, I mean, even I, in my youthful immaturity, realized this probably is. I don't think God works that way.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'll take that one off. But these two other things are just massive, massive blocks in my life. I can't do it. And these things and then what happened is over about 2 weeks, these things that had plagued me for 2.5 years, they literally disappeared. All of a sudden, within about a week, I would say within 2 weeks of that, all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I love academics. I think the thought of going 5 more years is exciting. And all of a sudden, the homesickness was gone. I had no desire. All of a sudden, I loved where I was living. The whole thought of was
Interesting.
fine. And then the kicker was just as I got clarity on that in those few weeks, um, a girl named Kobe asked me out.
That's who's now your wife,
And
right?
I got the girl at the end as well.
You got the girl.
I got
So your three conditions, just to be clear,
yeah,
was the girl,
the girl,
the homesickness,
the homesickness,
and then
and just being a student for 5 more years
right,
in university or graduate school.
right.
Yeah. Anyways, that was the turning point for me. And then because and then I thought, okay, I'll be a pastor. Um, and I didn't really know what that was going to be mean. The only thing I knew though is I knew I wanted to be a pastor that would somehow be a pastor that would connect deeply with not just religiously wired people,
Right.
because that was my experience. Pastors were good for religiously wired people. But I looked at increasingly, I looked at Canadian society and I just realized maybe 10 or 15% of Canadian society people are sort of religious by disposition.
Hmm.
They wake up and they go, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to go to mosque or whatever. That's just what I do. And the other 85% aren't. And I just thought, I thought my calling in life is to try to make God, to try to make, in my case, Christianity actually accessible and engaging. Not for the sure, I love the 15, but I really wanted to. How can I be part of and maybe even start a church that reaches the 85%?
So, have you ever looked back or regretted that decision of becoming a pastor?
Not a moment.
Not a moment.
Not
That's
a moment.
amazing.
Not a moment. Not a moment. I mean, listen, just like your life, just like anybody's life, I've had a lot of very difficult moments in my life. Uh, and some of those moments have been very difficult tied to my life as a pastor. Some have been tied to my life as a father of four kids, as a friend, as all of these things. But I would say no, never once did I go, oh my goodness, why did I? Although I should say this, let me say this. I have often said to my wife, I want to be careful about those your listeners that are educators, but about every late June of every year, I just sort of go, oh boy, I have 10 weeks off. I should have been a teacher.
I've thought that
I
often too.
regret that once in a while. I do, but no, I don't think I ever,
Well,
no.
so this leads me to my next question. I want to have you dig deep a little bit for a minute, and I'm sure, as all of us, we have many raw moments in our life. But what would you say has been your biggest raw moment in your life? Like almost like this aha moment, something that has changed you or defined you, and really impacted you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, for me, and again, this you're going to go, oh yeah, it's a pastor. What? Honestly, and I referenced this a little bit before. I was 12 or 13, and I literally remember having this moment where I was actually trying to understand the reality of this person that was alive 2,000 years ago, Jesus, that the Bible's filled with. And I was like, and I remember a moment in my life where the sort of the understanding of him went from here. And I realized he's actually, I had an experience of his realness to me that was as real as you sitting here with me. And I was like, hit. And that changed my life, that this person, um, and honestly, what's so striking to me about this is that, and that at one level, I'm not unique in this. I mean, it's just so, it continues to fascinate me that this person who was born into a poor, impoverished family in a small, tiny little part of the world and just off the eastern edge of the Mediterranean and never moved more than 70 miles from his house. And he had 3 years of public life that in some way, this one individual has impacted and shaped billions of people's lives. You just sort of go, how does that happen? How does that happen? And for me, it happened now. I just realized it. I realized when I just kind of opened my heart to that person, I said, okay, Jesus, if you're real, come inside of me, come live in me, and I'll follow you. I don't want that to sound like a cliche, but that honestly, Smith, that was the most raw, transformative moment of my life. And and it's not like every day I sense him like that, like you right here. Oh my goodness, there's many times I'm like, oh my goodness, God, where are you? Like, where are you here? Like I mean, I've done funerals for grief-stricken parents with babies and people whose, and people whose teenage, you know, child took their life. I mean, there's so many moments where I go, God, where? So it's not like all of a sudden it became Disney World every day.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that would be the rawest. And I don't know, because I just, when you ask that question, I'm sure of many or most of your guests. I would imagine that many times that raw moment was a hard moment.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for me, that most raw, it really was like the best moment.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
So
Have
yeah.
you, what would be your biggest challenge that you've had? I'm sure many in your life, but being a pastor, do you always feel the need to be on? Like, do you swear? Do you drink? Like, we all want to know these things. We want to know, like, are you normal like the rest of us? Like, or do you feel like you
Yeah,
always have to be this perfect specimen that
yeah.
everyone's expecting a pastor to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know what? You ought to interview my wife,
I
because
should.
you
I'd
would
get the real truth.
she's, of course, she sees me 24/7,
Right.
and so do my kids and stuff. Um, yeah, I honestly don't look at it that way. I don't look at it. Let me say this: there are people I will be more raw and transparent with than others,
Right.
like all of us,
Hmm.
right? Um, but yeah, I've never thought about it that way. I've never thought about it being, oh, I better, I better, like, what if somebody saw me here? And, like, I guess, because I have been, it's funny. I have learned part of this because London's not a big city,
Right.
and
Everybody knows everybody.
everybody does, right? And Forest City Community Church has become, a pretty large church. So everywhere I go, people come, right? So I know I can't actually live anonymously all that well. Um, but I don't really think about it. But yeah, do I make mistakes? Do I, you know, absolutely. I've always been pretty good with my verbal control. You asked me if I, so pretty, but there's things that'll push me too, right? Um, I don't know. Here's the thing for me. You asked me, the whole thing is part of the question, it's interesting. Part of the question comes to the whole point of authenticity. And authenticity to me is, at one level, it's being the same person everywhere,
No matter where you are.
no matter where you are. So if I really was kind of two people, that'd be bad. Like, if my family or my wife or my closest friends were like, oh man, we see a very different Rob, um, that would be really, I think that'd be a problem.
Right.
Be a problem, because then I wouldn't be authentic. I'd be sort of playing a role. I
Right.
would be playing the professional. Okay, I've got to be Mr. Christian guy. I got to be Mr. Pastor guy, and I know there's responsibility. I know I have that role, but I honestly just try to be me, and I try to show that when I teach on Sundays. I try to
Mhm.
show people. I try to open the door not just into the Bible for people, but I also try to open the door into my life so that they realize this is a normal person who is actually, trying to figure this out and sort this through, and understand what this means for his life, just like it is for all of us. Um, so um, so yeah, I I I that would be my guess, but I am. I also think there's a bit of an image that people sometimes look at pastors with, that they actually put on them, that is not true,
Mhm.
right? So you sort of go, oh, that person doesn't really struggle with the same things we struggle with. They're just sort of, and that's probably not true.
What's been your biggest challenge?
Oh boy. Um, I'd say a couple of things. I'll say a couple of things on that. And they would relate to certainly my life work, right? So 30 years ago, my wife and I, we started Forest City Community Church. And we moved here from British Columbia with 4 kids under the age of 7 um, to we just to start a brand new church in London, Ontario, and to start a brand new church that would again reach the 85% of people who don't really usually have a sense that God really has anything to do with their life, and to make God, to make Jesus, to make the Bible real to people. And so we started that. Just like I think back and I think, what were you like? So we didn't know anybody. We didn't have any money. We just moved here to do it. So that was obviously a massive challenge, and and a massive challenge to start that process and to begin that journey of creating this this community that would actually impact a lot of people in that way. That absolutely is the hardest thing I've ever done. Continues to be. I would say, you know, there's been different seasons that it's been especially hard. I honestly, I would say that the last season of the whole COVID era, the
Mhm.
2 years or so of COVID was just like it's just hard to describe how difficult. When I think back about the challenges of again starting a church with no people or no money, and and then not just trying to gather some Christians around you, but actually begin with people who aren't really people of faith, and all through that journey, and then to see the church grow, and then to move a few times. We were in rental facilities for the first 12 years, you know, setting up chairs every week, you know, doing everything. I used to play in the band every week, you know, and then get up and preach, and then, you know, and then still try to help people in their really difficult times and all that. And then the church grew, and then we, you know, had to somehow see how generous, you know, through campaigns of generosity and, you know, buy the land and build the building and expand it and expand it and expand it again as we went, all massively difficult. Um, but I'll tell you, the COVID time was so uniquely difficult that I was, and like many people many of us were completely not ready for what that was going to do because of what it did, the strain it put on relationships,
Mhm.
the strain it put even on our own mental fragility. I felt a kind of mental fragility myself where in times, in ways I'd never felt before, where I'd also felt like I don't even know the pattern of how things work anymore. And that was incredibly difficult to navigate that. And
Um, from one of your sermons on a Sunday that I've seen and I've heard from other people, you have suffered from depression, correct?
yeah, I would
Yeah.
say absolutely. There was a
Can we talk about that for a
sure.
minute and
Abs-
just how you kind of how you dealt with that and
yeah,
what helped you get out of it?
yeah. I would say exactly. You know, I'd say the you know one of the eras I really felt kind of depression I'd never sensed before was probably about 7 or 8 years into the life of the church. And 7 or 8 years in, and I mean the church is just it's like it's growing. Now it's like it's hundreds of people and it's impacting people, and you know we keep you know growing out of places, and I just felt there was there was this cumulative. I remember talking to my doctor about this, and he said, Rob, he said, people don't realize that stress doesn't always come from negative things. Stress comes from positive things too.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, you've had obviously a lot of stress in your life from both directions, and you actually don't even think about that.
Mhm.
And I would say for me, and so ultimately, yeah, it was a very dark period, and all of a sudden, I started finding myself, even though things were going so amazingly well, started finding myself I couldn't sleep well. I just had these very very just dark thoughts. My motivation level just started to plummet. My body started doing, I started having physical kind of sensations in my body that were weird that I never had. And I literally thought I was dying. I literally thought I was dying. My doctor was beautiful. He's a friend of mine still. And he had me said, okay, well, look, we'll do these tests and these tests and these tests. Cause I just didn't understand that I didn't understand the power of depressive or depression related symptoms on your body. I was completely naive. And I've always been really, this has been a weakness of mine. I've never had, I've never been able to, my wife, for example, is always she has such a great sense of being in touch with her emotions.
Mhm.
And I've always been terrible at it.
Oh, really?
I've been always terrible at it. It's kind of like, if you think about if you think about how a person can fall off the cliff after extended period of stress or whatever it is and fall into depression or whatever, um, if you think about this being a cliff
Hmm.
and there's the cliff, there's a lot of people like my wife. She's getting a little close. She's going, I'm getting close to the cliff. I better make some adjustments, and she'll adjust. And for me, I don't see the cliff. I'm like, no, I'm fine. This is fine. I'm
Just gonna
fine.
keep
I'm
going.
fine. I'm fine. And all of a sudden the next day, I'm off the cliff. And I'm like, what happened? That's partly because I just have never been super. I think I'm not wired up for that. And so I carry along until all of a sudden you're right on the edge of the cliff and you go, oh my goodness, my body is telling me now,
Right. But
you
when
are
you
in
look
trouble.
back, you probably see those signs that you weren't in tune with. Like, do you find that when you do look back, you go, oh, yeah, like that?
See,
No?
no.
Oh, okay. So you're
No,
you're really not in tune.
that's how clueless,
You
really.
could say like a typical male. Should I
Yeah,
say that?
you can absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's true. And I
Right.
I honestly don't think I could look at it analytically,
Right.
but I actually did not recognize the warning signs.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's
And
fair.
I probably had that two or three times in my life. And then how do I get out of it? Um, just a lot of rest. And for me, a lot of rest and then a lot of replenishing, really, really doing an inventory of my life. What replenishes me?
So how did you get out of, so did you get darkly into depression? Like were you full on, like you couldn't get out of bed, all that kind of stuff? Like,
I don't think I was there.
no.
No,
Okay.
no, no. But I certainly felt a kind of hopelessness, low energy level, um, and like I said, troublesome physiological things.
So did you question God in that moment? Like, have you gone through periods of your life where you're like, I know you said
Yeah,
earlier that you've
yeah,
gone, where are you, God, in
yeah,
certain situations, but at that time when you're going through your own
yeah,
suffering, did you find that you
yeah.
were,
Yeah, I would say this. I never really questioned God's existence or even in other even his love for me, but I certainly questioned um like why is this happening? Why are you not rescuing me? Why is this going on and on and on like this? Absolutely. At one level, I would say that in some of those harder, darker moments of my life, one of the things that's helped me a lot is probably that one section of the Bible called the Psalms, and the Psalms are incredibly raw prayers. That's
Mhm.
what they are. Unbelievably raw prayers of people who are more devoted to God than I am, like just incredibly incredible people of faith. But the kind of honest, raw prayers that they were able to pray before God, and they weren't oh, now I lay me down to sleep, you know, and for this bounty we're about to eat, we are most thankful. Like this kind of
Right.
stuff, like really raw, like the raw prayers, like even Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22. So, um, I would say being able to see raw prayers of other people in incredible moments of darkness, depression, overwhelmness, and that God can handle that. That helped me a lot.
I have a couple more questions and then
Yes.
we're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Biggest regret in your life?
Oh my goodness. Biggest regret. Well, it's not really a real regret. People have asked me, if you couldn't do this, what would you want to do? What would you want to do? I would love to have been a chaplain on the PGA Tour because I love golf, right?
Yes, we know you love golf.
I love golf. I just be able to travel all these beautiful golf courses and I don't know, give little bits of encouragement. Anyways, um, but that's not really a true regret.
Yeah.
What's a true regret? Again, see, man, I honestly, this is, I mean, I can point to individual moments where I go, oh my goodness, why, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Um, but I would say, but at any major point in my life, any of those most consequential moments, um, should I have married my wife? Should I have had our kids? Should I have become a follower of Jesus? Should I have become a pastor? Should I have gone this route of past of trying to do a church the way nobody else does church, but to try to reach people that aren't really into church? Like none of those things have I'd say none of them I regret. Um,
Should I define it differently? Like,
try,
do you
try.
wish that you would have dated more? Do you wish that you would have maybe drank more, partied more? Like, do you know what I mean?
Before I became a Christian, I
Yes,
became a
yeah.
pastor, and you sort of blew that. Yeah, yeah. You know what? It's so good. No, I'd say no. Like not really at all. I mean,
Really?
no,
Like,
really,
really?
no,
Is this
really.
like Pastor
No,
Rob or is this
no,
raw?
no, no. This is true. This is true. I mean, what I would say on that is, there's. Let me just say this. There's things I'd still like to do. My wife and we love traveling. I've been to most of the continents in the world. I've traveled a lot of the world. I'm heading off to Europe this week again. And so I do love, and I guess I regret opportunities that I've missed in terms of that, to see incredible places and cultures and people and all of that. But no, in terms of what you just said there, no, because here's the thing. And again, here, I'm just going to get a little preachy on you.
Oh, great.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes back, it goes to this one core verse I often come back to in the Bible, John 10, verse 10. Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and life in all of its fullness. And when I think about it, all of those sort of guilty pleasures you kind of talk about, as a pastor, I have watched a litany of of lives of people who have gone after these things, and it has not led them to life in all of its fullness. It has usually led to brokenness and regret. And so the kinds of things that I know that we sort of think, oh, I know deep down there's redemption, there's freedom, forgiveness for all these things, but usually usually most of those things become not what I thought they'd be. They're not as advertised. So so I don't really regret. I don't. And it's not that I didn't have plenty of my own party life and all of that before I really got serious about my faith and all that. Of course I did.
Do you have a guilty pleasure now?
Um, I mean, I would say I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure, but one of my favorite things is I've gotten a little bit too much into really good cigars and good scotch.
Oh, so you do drink. Okay.
So yeah, and the problem is that is with wine, like scotch, like wine. Once you start having the good stuff,
You can't go
you
back.
just can't
You
go
can't,
back.
right? And if you're going to indulge, I've always said this to friends, if you're going to indulge and you love chocolate, have the best of the best, right? Like don't cheap out. And
I am totally with you
yeah,
on that. I'm
that's
totally with
great.
you on that.
So, two more questions for you. The next is what has been, and I know as a pastor, you have helped so many people along your journey of life and their life, but what is one moment that just speaks to your heart that is heart wrenching, maybe, of someone that you may have helped or a situation that you've seen on your travels that has really made you not only go, wow, I'm grateful for the disposition I have in my life
Yeah.
and the gift of what I'm able to do and help others. But that one moment, and I know there's many,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
wanting you to dig deep to say, here's the moment that really was like, wow.
Oh my goodness. That is so difficult. I mean, I can, I'll give you a type and then I'll give you sort of a one. I'd say at the one level, let me give you an instance. So we just finished a 6K walk for water yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible, the generosity from people in our church. And I mean, I remember just 6 months ago when my wife and I were in northern Malawi and, um, you know, seeing seeing a young mom with a disabled child in a third world country with no supports, um, and thinking of the enormity of what they're going to have to do in their life. Having a child who can't walk or can't see, and they're 2 or 3 years old, and the mom and they're in a village and they don't have clean water. It's you're at a loss on and I guess what I would say in a moment like that, and I'm thinking of one of those moments, I'm I'm my mind and heart goes many ways. One is it propels me to bring things like that back to our church community and say, look, we can't fix everything in this young mom's life, but we can provide one of the most core things that is going to help her, and we can help change her life somewhat. We can help change that child's life. Um, and and to me, that's deeply, deeply satisfying. And then because then I also see even in lives like this young one, you see sort of the God-given heroism that many people have that is just so inspiring, that I don't know if I would have that in that instance. Um, but I think that then in a sort of if I extrapolate that in a repeating way, I would say I just don't think there is anything as powerful in life as finding yourself in a place, in a position to be really just for whatever reason God does this, for God to use you in this moment to bring his hope and his love to somebody else's life. That has got to me to be the biggest, that's the best high I think a person can ever have in life. There's it's there's nothing quite like that. There's nothing quite like realizing I'm being used as an instrument by the God of this universe, this God himself, all of his love, you know, and this God and his son Jesus, and then somehow this other person's life, I get to be able to be the conduit,
Mhm.
and that's powerful. And again, I'll say this. I think your listeners might go, "Oh yeah, great to be a pastor. Yeah, nice for you. Get those chances." You know what? We all get those chances.
We do. We do.
We
And
all get those chances.
I say that often, and it's funny that you use conduit because people are like, oh, it must be nice to have a magazine and have this show. I'm just the conduit that this is flowing through, right? It's like
So,
I just sit here and what comes to me and the questions that I need to ask, they'll just come. But it's in hope that someone will be touched by your message
yeah,
or right. Like there's
yeah,
no end game to it. It's just
yeah,
doing what you've been called to do. So
yeah.
if you were to have one word to describe you, what would that word be?
The word comes to my mind is called.
interesting.
It's not a common word, but I feel called to be who I am, to do what I'm doing. And it's bigger than me.
And you know what? That's a wrap, but I'm going to have you close your eyes and I just want you, just close your eyes
Okay.
and I'll keep talking while I
Okay.
do this. Got to make sure that, okay. Um, when you open your eyes, I want you to say the very first word that comes to your mind. Okay, you can open.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow. For people that are listening at home, I just put a mirror up in front of Rob and asked him to tell us the first word that he thinks of when he sees himself. Beautiful. Rob, thank you so much for being here today.
Wow.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a joy. Thank you so much.
Let's get real, sister.